The stars had never looked so bright as they did that morning when the first alien ship appeared in Earth's sky. Jake Sullivan stood on the bridge of the starship Liberty, watching the massive vessel emerge from what seemed like empty space. The ship was 3 times larger than anything humans had ever built, its surface gleaming with a strange purple metal that seemed to shift and move in the light of the sun. Jake had been chosen to lead this historic moment because he was calm, under pressure, and good with words. The Earth Defense Council had spent months preparing for this day, though they never really knew when it would come. Now it was here, and Jake felt the weight of his entire species resting on his shoulders. The alien ship sent a message in perfect English, which surprised everyone. The voice was deep and smooth, with an accent that sounded almost musical. "Greetings, primitive inhabitants of the third planet. We are the Zephyrians of the great empire that rules this sector of space. We come in peace to welcome you into our galactic family." Jake looked at his communications officer, a young woman named Betty Clark who had been studying alien contact protocols for years. She nodded at him, indicating that everything seemed normal so far. Jake pressed the communication button and responded carefully. "Welcome to our solar system. I am Commander Jake Sullivan, representing the United Earth Government. We are honored by your visit." The alien voice laughed, a sound that sent chills down Jake's spine. "How quaint. You speak as if you have a choice in this matter. We are not visitors, little humans. We are your new masters, but do not worry, we will be kind rulers if you cooperate." The bridge fell silent. Everyone had hoped that first contact would be friendly, but they had also prepared for the possibility that it might not be. Jake kept his voice steady as he replied, "Perhaps there has been a misunderstanding. Earth is a sovereign world with its own government and laws. We welcome peaceful trade and friendship, but we do not seek rulers." Another laugh came through the speakers, this one colder than before. "Sovereign? You barely crawled out of your gravity well a few centuries ago. Your weapons are simple metal and chemical explosives. Your ships move slowly through space using primitive fusion drives. You are children playing with toys, and now the adults have arrived to take control." On the main screen, the alien ship began to change shape. Panels slid open to reveal weapons that glowed with an ominous red light. The ship's hull extended long arms that crackled with energy. Jake realized they were looking at technology far beyond anything Earth possessed. "To prove we are serious," the alien voice continued, "we will now demonstrate our power. Do not be afraid. This is merely a small example of what we can do." A beam of red light shot from the alien ship toward a small asteroid floating nearby. The asteroid simply vanished, turned to dust in less than a second. The demonstration was clear. Resistance would be futile. High Chancellor Vextar sat in his command chamber aboard the great ship Dominator, watching the human reaction with amusement. He was an ancient being, even by Zephyrian standards, having lived for over 3,000 years. In that time, he had conquered dozens of primitive worlds and enslaved hundreds of species. Humans would be no different from the others. "Sir," one of his officers reported, "our scans show they have approximately 12 armed vessels in their entire fleet. Their largest ship has less firepower than one of our scout vessels. Their planetary defenses consist of simple missiles and energy weapons." Vextar nodded with satisfaction. As expected, another primitive species that believes it is advanced because it has learned to split atoms and travel between planets. They will surrender within days once they understand the futility of resistance. Back on the Liberty, Jake was receiving urgent messages from Earth. President Matthew Carter himself was on the line, along with Admiral Sandra Hayes, the head of Earth's military forces. Their faces appeared on Jake's private communication screen, both looking grim. "Jake," the president said quietly, "what's your assessment of the situation?" "Sir, they're not here for diplomacy. They're here to conquer us. Their ship alone could probably destroy our entire fleet. They seem to think we're just another primitive species to be enslaved." Admiral Hayes leaned forward. "Our sensors are picking up more ships moving into the outer system, at least 50 so far, with more arriving every hour. Jake, I need you to keep them talking while we figure out our options." Jake nodded and switched back to the main communication channel. The alien voice was speaking again, outlining the terms of Earth's surrender. You will relocate 90% of your population to our mining colonies in distant systems. The remaining 10% will serve as caretakers for your world, which we will use as a supply station. Your military forces will be disbanded immediately. Any resistance will result in the destruction of your major population centers. And if we refuse? Jake asked, though he already knew the answer. Then we will simply take what we want by force. Your species will be extinct within a week. We have done this many times before, little humans. Some species choose the easy path of surrender. Others choose the hard path of destruction. Both paths lead to the same destination, our rule. Jake muted his communicator and spoke quietly to his crew. They're giving us time to think about it, but not much time. They want an answer in 30 of their days, which works out to about a month in Earth time. Lisa Monroe, his science officer, had been quietly working at her station throughout the conversation. She suddenly looked up with alarm. Commander, I'm detecting some kind of scanning beam directed at our ship. They're not just talking to us. They're studying us. Jake felt a cold chill run down his spine. What kind of studying? Everything. Our ship structure, our weapon systems, our crew's vital signs. They're downloading data about our technology and biology. Sir, I think they're preparing for war, not hoping for surrender. The realization hit Jake like a physical blow. The Zephyrians had no intention of waiting for a peaceful surrender. They were already preparing to conquer Earth by force. The 30 days they offered was just time to study human weaknesses and plan their attack. Jake opened a secure channel to Earth Command. This is urgent. They're scanning us right now, learning everything about our capabilities. Whatever we're going to do, we need to do it fast. These aliens aren't just confident they can defeat us. They're already planning how to do it. The alien voice came through the speakers one more time. We will return in 30 standard days for your answer. Use this time wisely, humans. Consider what you value more, your pride or your lives. We have destroyed civilizations far older and more advanced than yours. Do not make the mistake of believing you are special. The great alien ship began to fade from view, using some kind of cloaking technology that human sensors could barely detect. Within minutes, it was gone, leaving only empty space and the memory of its terrible power. Jake stared out at the stars, knowing that everything had changed. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe, but their new neighbors were not friends. They were conquerors who saw humans as nothing more than slaves to be broken, or obstacles to be removed. The war for Earth's freedom had not yet begun, but Jake could already feel it coming like a storm on the horizon. President Matthew Carter stood before the emergency session of the United Earth Council, looking at the faces of representatives from every nation on the planet. The Great Hall in Geneva had never hosted a meeting this important, and everyone knew that the decisions made in the next few hours would determine whether humanity survived as a free species or became slaves to alien masters. The situation is clear, President Carter said, his voice carrying across the silent chamber. The Zephyrians have given us 30 days to surrender unconditionally or face complete destruction. Their technology is far superior to ours, and their fleet outnumbers us by hundreds to one. Some of you may think surrender is our only option. A delegate from the European Federation stood up. Mr. President, surely you cannot be considering resistance. We have seen what their weapons can do. One ship destroyed an asteroid in seconds. How can we fight an entire empire with such power? Before the president could answer, Admiral Sandra Hayes rose from her seat at the front of the chamber. She was a tall woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone who had spent her life defending Earth from threats both known and unknown. Delegate Morrison, I understand your fear. I have been studying the recordings of our encounter with the aliens, and yes, their weapons are powerful. But I have also been studying something else. Their behavior. They are arrogant. They believe we are helpless because our technology appears primitive to them. That arrogance is their weakness. Admiral Hayes activated a holographic display that showed technical diagrams and data analyses. For the past 20 years, our scientists have been working on theoretical weapons based on quantum physics. The Zephyrians dismissed human science as primitive during their visit, but they made a critical error. They assumed that because our current weapons are simple, we have no other capabilities. Dr. Alex Turner stepped forward from the group of scientists seated along the wall. He was a thin man with wild hair and excited eyes, the kind of person who spent more time thinking about impossible theories than eating regular meals. What Admiral Hayes is referring to are quantum disruption weapons. For years, we believed they were impossible to build because they required too much power and precision. But 3 months ago, we had a breakthrough. The holographic display changed to show a complex device that looked more like a work of art than a weapon. It consisted of crystalline structures arranged in patterns that seemed to shift and flow, even though they were perfectly still. We call it a quantum phase disruptor. Instead of using brute force like conventional weapons, it works by shifting the quantum state of matter at the molecular level. Essentially, it convinces enemy shields and armor that they do not exist. Several delegates began talking at once, but President Carter raised his hand for silence. Dr. Turner, how many of these weapons can we produce in 30 days? With every factory on Earth working around the clock, we can build enough to equip our entire fleet. But there is a problem. We have only tested the weapon in computer simulations. We do not know if it will actually work against alien technology. Admiral Hayes stepped forward again. That is a risk we will have to take. But we have other advantages besides secret weapons. The Zephyrians expect us to meet them in traditional space battle formation. Large ships fighting large ships in open space. They do not expect guerrilla tactics. Captain Ryan Brooks, who had been quietly listening from the back of the chamber, stood up. Admiral, I have been training volunteer pilots in unconventional combat techniques. Our ships are smaller and more maneuverable than the alien vessels. If we can avoid direct confrontation and use hit-and-run tactics, we might be able to level the playing field. The delegate from the African Union raised her hand. Captain Brooks, you are talking about using civilian volunteers in a war against an advanced alien empire. How can untrained civilians possibly survive such a conflict? Ryan's face was serious but determined. Delegate Okafor, you are right that they are not trained soldiers. But they are pilots, engineers, miners, and explorers who have spent their lives working in dangerous conditions. They know how to think quickly and adapt to unexpected situations. Most importantly, they are fighting for their homes and families. That gives them motivation that no amount of training can provide. President Carter looked around the chamber, seeing fear in some faces, but also determination in others. We have a choice to make. We can surrender and hope the aliens will treat us with mercy, or we can fight and risk everything for the chance to remain free. I will not make this decision alone. We will vote. As the delegates prepared to cast their votes, Admiral Hayes received an urgent message on her communication device. She read it quickly and her face went pale. Mr. President, I am receiving reports from our deep space monitoring stations. The alien fleet has grown to over 3,000 ships and is already moving toward the inner solar system. They are not waiting 30 days. They are preparing to attack much sooner. The chamber erupted in panicked voices, but Dr. Turner was already working furiously on his portable computer. Admiral, if they are moving their fleet into position, we might be able to use that against them. I have been working on a secondary application of quantum technology, a virus that can be transmitted through their communication networks. A virus? President Carter asked. Their ships must communicate with each other to coordinate such a large fleet. If we can introduce a quantum virus into their network, it will cause their own systems to malfunction. Their weapons might even turn against them, but deploying it would require getting very close to their command ships, probably a suicide mission. The voting continued despite the chaos, and when the results were announced, the decision was clear. Humanity would fight. The vote was not unanimous, but it was decisive. Earth would not surrender without a battle. Admiral Hayes immediately began issuing orders to fleet commanders around the solar system. All ships are to begin installing quantum disruptors immediately. Captain Brooks, I want your volunteer squadrons ready for deployment within 72 hours. Dr. Turner, You have unlimited resources to complete your quantum virus project. Meanwhile, Captain Lisa Monroe was analyzing the data her sensors had collected during the alien visit. She had discovered something that might be even more important than new weapons. The aliens had a pattern to their thinking that was completely predictable. "Admiral," Lisa reported over the communication system, "I have been studying the alien ship's movements and scanning patterns. They follow rigid procedures that never vary. Their society appears to be based on strict hierarchy and unchanging traditions. They cannot adapt quickly to unexpected situations." Admiral Hayes smiled for the first time since the crisis began. "Captain Monroe, that might be the most important intelligence we have gathered. If they cannot adapt, then every surprise we give them will be more effective than the last." As the Earth Council session ended, and representatives returned to their nations to prepare for war, President Carter remained in the chamber with his closest advisors. The weight of leadership had never felt heavier, but he knew there was no alternative to the path they had chosen. "Admiral Hayes," he said quietly, "what are our real chances of victory?" Sandra Hayes looked out the great windows at the night sky, where alien ships were already moving between the stars like sharks circling their prey. "Mr. President, if we fight them the way they expect us to fight, we will lose quickly and completely. But if we can surprise them, if we can show them that humans are not the primitive species they believe us to be, then we have a chance. Maybe, not a good chance, but a chance nonetheless." President Carter nodded. "Then we will make our own luck. Humanity has survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and disasters for thousands of years. We have always found a way to endure when everything seemed hopeless. We will find a way now." Outside, the stars continued to shine, but now they carried the promise of war rather than peace. Humanity had 30 days to prepare for the fight of their lives, but they would not spend those days in fear. They would spend them building weapons, training pilots, and preparing to show the galaxy that Earth's children were not as helpless as they appeared. The Zephyrian invasion fleet arrived at the edge of the solar system like a swarm of metal locusts, their ships blotting out the stars with their massive forms. High Chancellor Vexitar stood in the command center of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching the tactical displays show 3,000 vessels moving into perfect formation. "Report," Vexitar commanded, his voice echoing through the vast chamber where hundreds of officers worked at crystalline control stations. "Sir," replied his tactical coordinator, "we are detecting no human fleet presence in the expected defensive positions. Our scanners show only empty space where their ships should be waiting to surrender or fight." Vexitar's 4 eyes narrowed with suspicion. In over 2,000 years of conquest, he had never encountered a species that simply disappeared when faced with invasion. "Expand the search pattern, scan every moon, asteroid, and space station in this system. The humans are hiding somewhere. Behind Jupiter's massive bulk, Captain Emma Rodriguez floated in the command chair of her modified mining vessel, the Star Dancer. Around her, 50 other ships waited in complete silence, their crews barely breathing as they watched the alien fleet spread across the solar system like a deadly net. Emma had volunteered for this mission because she knew the outer planets better than anyone else. She had spent 15 years flying mining runs between Jupiter's moons, learning every gravitational current and magnetic field anomaly in the system. Now that knowledge would be used for war instead of commerce. "All ships, maintain radio silence," Emma whispered into her communication device. "Remember, we wait until they are fully committed to their approach vector. Then we hit them from behind while they are focused on Earth." The human ships were not the sleek military vessels that the Zephyrians expected to face. They were converted, cargo haulers, mining ships, and passenger transports that had been hastily equipped with Dr. Turner's quantum disruptors. They looked like exactly what they were: civilian craft pressed into military service by desperate circumstances. But looks could be deceiving, and the Zephyrians were about to learn that lesson the hard way. As the alien fleet moved deeper into the solar system, they triggered the first of humanity's surprises. Dr. Turner had spent the past month working with engineer teams to deploy a network of quantum mines throughout the outer system, hidden in asteroid fields and floating debris. The key: mines were not designed to destroy the massive alien ships. but to do something far more dangerous to an enemy that relied on perfect coordination. They would disrupt the Zephyrian communication and navigation systems at exactly the wrong moment. Commander Zexkol of the Advanced Scout Group was the first to encounter humanity's trap. His ship, the Swift Predator, was leading a formation of 12 vessels toward Mars when space around them suddenly erupted in brilliant flashes of silver light. "What was that?" Zexkol demanded, but his communications officer could only stare at his control panel in confusion. "Sir, our navigation computers are showing conflicting data. Our sensors indicate we are simultaneously in 4 different locations, and our shields are fluctuating between full power and complete failure." Similar reports began flooding in from across the alien fleet. The quantum mines were not destroying ships, but they were creating chaos in the previously perfect formation. Ships that had moved together for thousands of years were suddenly unable to coordinate their movements or communicate clearly with their commanders. High Chancellor Vextar watched his tactical display dissolve into a scattered mess of confused signals and contradictory reports. How is this possible? Human technology should not be capable of affecting our systems. His science advisor, an ancient Zephyrian named Mordan, studied the readings with growing alarm. "Sir, these weapons appear to operate on quantum mechanical principles that we dismissed as theoretical impossibilities. They are not attacking our ships directly, but changing the fundamental properties of space around them." Meanwhile, Captain Emma Rodriguez received the signal she had been waiting for. The alien fleet was now committed to their attack vector, spread out across millions of kilometers of space and struggling with system malfunctions. It was time for humanity's first strike. "All ships, this is Stardancer. Execute Operation Lightning. Strike. Hit them fast, hit them hard, and get out before they can respond." 50 human ships burst from behind Jupiter's moons like a pack of wolves emerging from the forest. They moved in small groups, using the gravitational fields of the gas giant's satellites to slingshot themselves toward the confused alien formations at incredible speeds. Lieutenant Colonel Steve Parker commanded a group of modified cargo vessels that had been fitted with the most powerful quantum disruptors that Earth's factories could produce. His target was a cluster of Zephyrian heavy cruisers that were trying to reform their battle line after the mine attack. "Remember," Steve broadcast to his pilots, "these are not energy shields like we trained against. The disruptors work by convincing matter that it exists in a different quantum state. Aim for the center of their ships and fire continuous beams." The human ships opened fire at maximum range, sending invisible streams of quantum energy toward the alien vessels. To any observer, nothing seemed to happen at first. There were no bright explosions or visible beams of light. Then the impossible occurred. The Zephyrian ships, which had seemed invulnerable just moments before, began to come apart at the molecular level. Their energy shields flickered and died as the quantum disruptors convinced the shield generators that they were made of something other than solid matter. Commander Zexkol watched in horror as his flagship's hull began to phase in and out of existence. "All weapons return fire immediately. Destroy these primitive vessels before they can damage us further." But the Zephyrian response was slow and clumsy. Their weapons were designed to fight conventional enemies with predictable tactics. The human ships darted between asteroids and used the gravitational fields of planets to change direction in ways that the alien targeting systems could not follow. Captain Amy Foster led a boarding team that accomplished something no one had thought possible. They captured a Zephyrian warship. Using a modified shuttle equipped with quantum phase technology, Amy's team literally passed through the enemy ship's hull and materialized inside its command center. The Zephyrian crew, who had never faced an enemy that could appear inside their own ship, surrendered immediately. Within hours, human technicians were downloading the entire contents of the alien ship's computer systems, gaining access to military codes, fleet positions, and tactical plans. "This is incredible," Dr. Turner reported to Admiral Hayes after analyzing the captured data. "The Zephyrians have detailed plans for conquering over 100 different worlds, but every single plan follows the same pattern. They never adapt their tactics to different enemies, they just use bigger ships and more firepower." Admiral Hayes studied the intelligence reports with growing excitement. Dr. Turner, Are you telling me that an empire that has conquered dozens of civilizations has never learned to be flexible in combat? Exactly. Their society is so rigid and hierarchical that innovation is discouraged. Lower-ranking officers never question orders, and higher-ranking commanders never change proven tactics. They are fighting this war the same way they fought wars 1,000 years ago. The human hit-and-run attacks continued for hours, with small groups of ships striking at the edges of the alien formation and disappearing before the Zephyrians could mount an effective response. Each attack caused more confusion and system failures, and each success made the aliens more desperate and less coordinated. High Chancellor Vextar finally lost his temper and made the mistake that Admiral Hayes had been hoping for. Instead of maintaining his careful formation and adapting to human tactics, he ordered a general advance toward Earth. All ships, maximum speed toward the third planet. We will end this primitive resistance with overwhelming force. The Zephyrian fleet surged forward in a massive wave, their ships burning through space at full power. It was an impressive display of technological might, but it was also exactly what humanity needed them to do. Admiral Hayes watched the alien fleet approach Earth's defensive grid and smiled coldly. They think they are overwhelming us with superior numbers. They do not realize they are walking into the center of our trap. Captain Lisa Monroe, now commanding the Orbital Defense Platform Guardian Station, received the final authorization codes from Earth Command. All defensive systems are now active, Admiral. The aliens are about to discover that Earth has more than one surprise waiting for them. The Zephyrians had underestimated humanity's intelligence, adaptability, and determination. Now they were about to pay the price for their arrogance as they flew directly into the most sophisticated defensive network that human science and desperation could create. The real battle for Earth was about to begin, and for the first time since the aliens arrived, Admiral Hayes believed that humanity might actually have a chance to win. 3 months had passed since the first Zephyrian ships entered the solar system, and the war had settled into a deadly pattern of strike and counterstrike. The aliens controlled the outer planets from Jupiter outward, but Earth's defensive grid had held against every assault. Both sides had suffered terrible losses, but neither had achieved decisive victory. Captain Nicole Adams sat in the command center of the Resistance base on Ceres, studying tactical reports that painted a grim picture of humanity's situation. Her dark hair was streaked with premature gray from the stress of constant combat, and her eyes carried the haunted look of someone who had seen too many friends die in the cold vacuum of space. The numbers are not good, Nicole reported to the assembled commanders during their daily briefing. We have lost 60% of our original fleet, and our quantum disruptor production facilities are running low on rare earth materials. The Zephyrians are bringing in reinforcements faster than we can build new weapons. Admiral Hayes, attending the meeting via secure communication link from Earth, nodded grimly. Captain Adams, what is your assessment of enemy morale and tactics? Nicole pulled up a holographic display showing recent battle recordings. That is where we have found something interesting, Admiral. The Zephyrians are becoming frustrated and making increasingly desperate decisions. They cannot understand why a primitive species continues to resist their overwhelming technological advantage. The recordings showed Zephyrian commanders making tactical errors that would have been unthinkable at the beginning of the war. Ships broke formation to pursue human raiders, leaving gaps in their defenses. Commanders issued contradictory orders when their original plans failed to work. Most importantly, they seemed unable to learn from their mistakes. Admiral, Nicole continued, I believe their rigid social structure is becoming a liability. They have never faced an enemy that refuses to follow predictable patterns. Every time we do something unexpected, their response becomes more chaotic and less effective. Meanwhile, in his laboratory buried deep beneath the Swiss Alps, Dr. Alex Turner was putting the finishing touches on humanity's most desperate weapon. The quantum virus had taken months to perfect, requiring breakthrough advances in theoretical physics that pushed human science far beyond anything previously achieved. The virus is ready, Dr. Turner reported to President Carter and Admiral Hayes during an emergency meeting. But deploying it will require a ship to penetrate deep into the enemy fleet and transmit the virus directly into their command network. The pilot will not survive the mission. Admiral Hayes studied the technical specifications with a heavy heart. Dr. Turner, assuming the mission succeeds, what will be the effect on the enemy fleet? Complete chaos, Admiral. The virus will spread through their communication network within minutes, causing their own computers to treat friendly ships as enemies. Their weapons will begin firing on each other automatically, and their navigation systems will send ships on collision courses. It will be like watching a perfectly coordinated organism suddenly develop a fatal cancer. The room fell silent as everyone contemplated the implications. This was not just a weapon. It was a potential war-ending strategy that required the ultimate sacrifice from a volunteer pilot. Lieutenant Danny Walsh stepped forward from the group of officers standing along the wall. He was young, barely 25, with the kind of fearless attitude that made him an excellent pilot but worried his commanding officers. Admiral, I volunteer for the mission. Lieutenant Walsh, Admiral Hayes said carefully, you understand that this is a one-way trip. Even if everything goes perfectly, you will not be coming home. Danny's face was calm and determined. Admiral, I have lost my entire family to Zephyrian bombardments. My parents, my sister, my fiancé, they are all gone. If I can help end this war and prevent other families from suffering the same loss, then my life will have meaning. While preparations for the quantum virus mission continued, Marine Colonel Kelly Thompson was leading humanity's first major ground offensive on Mars. The Zephyrians had established a forward base in the Valles Marineris Canyon system, using it to coordinate their attacks on the inner planets. Kelly had spent her career studying asymmetric warfare tactics, learning how smaller forces could defeat larger ones through superior mobility and unpredictable strategies. Now she was putting those lessons into practice against an enemy that had never faced guerrilla warfare. Remember, Kelly briefed her assault teams as they prepared to deploy from their hidden positions in the Martian polar ice caps. The Zephyrians expect us to attack their strongest positions with maximum force. Instead, we are going to hit their supply lines, communication centers, and support facilities. We will make them afraid to venture outside their fortified positions. The human Marines moved across the Martian surface like ghosts, using the planet's natural dust storms and extreme terrain to mask their approach. They had spent weeks studying Zephyrian patrol patterns and had discovered that the aliens never varied their routes or timing. The first attack came at dawn, when a Zephyrian supply convoy was traveling through a narrow canyon between their main base and a mining operation. Kelly's teams had spent 3 days preparing the ambush, using improvised explosives and captured alien weapons to create a killing zone. When the convoy entered the canyon, the humans struck from multiple directions simultaneously. The Zephyrian guards trained to fight in open space battles were completely unprepared for close-quarters combat in difficult terrain. Within minutes, the entire convoy was destroyed, and the humans had captured valuable intelligence about enemy operations. But the real prize came when Kelly's infiltration team managed to penetrate the main Zephyrian base during the confusion of the convoy attack. Using quantum phase technology similar to what Amy Foster had used in space, the human soldiers walked through the base's walls and appeared inside the command center. Incredible, Kelly whispered, as her team's tech specialist downloaded data from the alien computers. They have detailed files on every species they have ever conquered, including complete tactical analyses and psychological profiles. But look at this. Every single conquest followed exactly the same pattern. The intelligence data revealed the Zephyrian Empire's greatest weakness. They had become so successful using the same tactics for thousands of years that they had lost the ability to adapt when those tactics failed. They were like a master chess player who had memorized every possible game, but could not handle an opponent who moved the pieces in unexpected ways. High Chancellor Vexitar was beginning to understand that something had gone terribly wrong with what should have been a simple conquest. His reports to the Imperial Council were becoming increasingly desperate as he tried to explain how a primitive species was continuing to resist the might of the Empire. The humans fight like no enemy we have ever encountered, Vexitar reported during a secure communication session with the Emperor himself. They do not follow standard military protocols. They attack where we least expect it and retreat before we can respond effectively. Our tactical computers cannot predict their movements because they do not follow logical patterns. The Emperor's response was cold and unforgiving. High Chancellor, you assured the Council that this conquest would be completed within weeks. You have now been engaged with these primitives for 3 months with no decisive victory. Perhaps it is time to consider that the problem lies not with the enemy, but with your leadership. The threat was clear. Failure in the Zephyrian Empire was not tolerated, and commanders who could not achieve victory were replaced by those who could. Vextar knew that his 1,000-year career was hanging by a thread, and desperate commanders often made fatal mistakes. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Danny Walsh was making his final preparations for the quantum virus mission. His ship, a modified stealth fighter called the Shadow Dancer, had been equipped with the most advanced cloaking technology that human science could produce. More importantly, it carried Dr. Turner's quantum virus in a specialized transmission array that could broadcast the weapon directly into the Zephyrian command network. Danny, Admiral Hayes said during their final meeting, I want you to know that what you are doing today will be remembered for as long as humanity exists. You are not just a pilot on a mission. You are the person who may well save our entire species. Danny smiled, and for a moment he looked like the young man he had been before the war stole everything he cared about. Admiral, just make sure that when this is over, people remember that we did not surrender. We fought for our freedom, and we won it with courage, intelligence, and sacrifice. As Danny's ship disappeared into the darkness between the stars heading toward the heart of the enemy fleet, every human in the solar system held their breath. The quantum virus mission would either end the war in humanity's favor or provide the Zephyrians with their final victory. The next few hours would determine whether humanity's greatest gamble would pay off or whether their species would be remembered, only as another footnote in the Zephyrian Empire's long history of conquest. But Danny Walsh was not thinking about history or legacy as he flew toward almost certain death. He was thinking about his family. The quantum virus spread through the Zephyrian communication network like wildfire through dry grass, jumping from ship to ship faster than their computers could process what was happening. Lieutenant Danny Walsh had succeeded in his mission, transmitting Dr. Turner's weapon directly into the heart of the enemy fleet before his ship was destroyed by defensive fire. Within minutes, the carefully coordinated Zephyrian armada began to tear itself apart from the inside. Ship computers that had worked flawlessly for centuries suddenly identified their own allies as enemy targets. Navigation systems sent vessels on collision courses with each other. Weapons that had never malfunctioned began firing randomly at anything within range. High Chancellor Vexitar watched in horror from the bridge of his flagship as his mighty fleet descended into chaos. What is happening? He demanded. But his officers could only stare at their control panels in bewilderment. Sir, his tactical coordinator reported with a shaking voice, our own computers are showing that every ship in the fleet is an enemy vessel. The targeting systems are trying to lock weapons onto our own ships. I cannot shut down the attack protocols. Across the Zephyrian fleet, similar scenes were playing out on hundreds of vessels. The virus had been designed specifically to exploit the aliens' greatest strength, their perfect coordination and communication. By turning those advantages into weaknesses, humanity had achieved what brute force could never accomplish. Captain Nicole Adams watched the enemy fleet's destruction from her command post on Ceres, hardly believing what her sensors were showing. Admiral Hayes, she reported over the communication link, the Zephyrian formation is completely broken. Their ships are firing on each other and their command structure has collapsed. It is working beyond our best projections. Admiral Hayes felt a mixture of triumph and sadness as she watched the tactical displays. Victory was within reach, but it had come at a terrible price. Too many good people had died to reach this moment, and Danny Walsh's sacrifice would never be forgotten. All human forces, Admiral Hayes broadcast across the fleet communication network, begin general advance. The enemy is in chaos, but we must press our advantage before they can recover. This is our chance to end the war. The remaining human ships, barely 200 vessels against what had been a fleet of thousands, surged forward to engage the confused and disorganized Zephyrian forces. But now the numbers meant nothing. An enemy that could not coordinate its movements or trust its own computers was helpless against even a much smaller force. Meanwhile, the effects of humanity's victory were spreading far beyond the solar system. The quantum virus had not only disabled the Zephyrian fleet, but had also transmitted itself back to their home worlds through the Empire's communication network. Across dozens of star systems, Zephyrian military bases and government facilities found their computers turning against them. More importantly, other species that had been enslaved by the Zephyrian Empire for centuries were learning that their oppressors were not invincible. On worlds throughout the galaxy, rebellions began to break out as subjugated peoples realized that the Empire's iron grip was weakening. The Korthak, a warrior species that had been conquered 300 years earlier, were the first to openly revolt. Their leader, War Chief Gorak, had been waiting decades for a sign that the Zephyrian Empire could be defeated. The chaos in the human star system provided exactly the opportunity he needed. "The time of vengeance has come," Gorak announced to his assembled fighters. "The metal tyrants who enslaved our children and destroyed our worlds are falling. We will strike now while they are weak and reclaim our freedom." Similar uprisings began across the galaxy as news of humanity's resistance spread through underground networks that had operated in secret for generations. Species that had given up hope of freedom began to remember what it meant to fight for their own destiny. Back in the solar system, the final battle was reaching its climax. Admiral Hayes personally led the assault on the Zephyrian command ship, using a captured alien vessel that had been modified with human quantum weapons. The irony was not lost on her that humanity was using the enemy's own technology against them. "This is Admiral Sandra Hayes of the United Earth Defense Force," she broadcast on all frequencies as her ship approached the massive enemy flagship. "High Chancellor Vextar, your fleet is destroyed and your empire is falling. I am offering you one chance to surrender unconditionally." Vextar's response came immediately, filled with rage and disbelief. "Impossible. We are the masters of this galaxy. We have ruled for 10,000 years. You are nothing but primitive savages who stumbled onto dangerous technology." "Chancellor," Admiral Hayes replied calmly, "we are the species you underestimated. You believed that because our weapons were simple and our ships were small, we could not threaten your empire. You forgot that intelligence, adaptability, and determination are more powerful than any technology." The final assault on the Zephyrian flagship was swift and decisive. Human boarding teams, led by veterans like Amy Foster and Kelly Thompson, penetrated the ship's defenses using quantum phase technology and captured the command center within hours. Vextar himself was taken prisoner, along with the remaining senior officers of what had once been the most powerful military force in the galaxy. President Matthew Carter stood before the United Earth Council once again, but this time the atmosphere was completely different. Instead of fear and desperation, the chamber was filled with representatives from dozens of alien species who had come to Earth to form a new galactic alliance based on freedom and cooperation rather than conquest and oppression. "Today marks the beginning of a new era," President Carter announced to the assembled delegates. "The Zephyrian Empire, which ruled through fear and oppression for millennia, has fallen. In its place we will build something better. A coalition of free worlds working together for mutual benefit and protection." Dr. Turner, now recognized as one of the greatest scientists in galactic history, was working with researchers from many different species to share humanity's quantum technology freely. Instead of using their technological advantages to dominate others as the Zephyrians had done, humans chose to lift up their new allies and create a galaxy where innovation and cooperation flourished. "The quantum principles we discovered were not meant to be weapons of conquest," Dr. Turner explained to a gathering of alien scientists. "They are tools for exploration and creation. Together, we can use this technology to solve problems that have plagued civilizations for thousands of years." Captain Emma Rodriguez, promoted to admiral after her crucial role in the early battles, was now overseeing the establishment of new trade routes and defensive agreements throughout the former Zephyrian territories. The mining skills she had learned in the outer solar system were proving invaluable in helping liberated worlds rebuild their economies and develop their natural resources. "The galaxy is full of opportunities. Emma reported to the Galactic Council during its first official meeting on Earth. Species that were forced to mine raw materials for Zephyrian warships can now use those same resources to build hospitals, schools, and exploration vessels. We have a chance to create something unprecedented, a truly peaceful and prosperous galactic civilization. In the end, High Chancellor Vextar found himself in a human prison on Earth, contemplating the complete destruction of everything he had believed about the natural order of the universe. His guards were polite and professional, providing him with books and educational materials about human history and philosophy. How? Vexitar asked Captain Lisa Monroe during one of her visits to check on the prisoner's welfare. How did a species that achieved spaceflight only centuries ago defeat an empire that had conquered the galaxy? Lisa considered the question carefully before answering. Chancellor, your empire's greatest strength was also its greatest weakness. You were so successful for so long that you stopped learning and growing. You believed that because something had always worked, it would always work. Humans never had that luxury. We have always faced challenges that forced us to adapt, innovate, and find new solutions to old problems. She paused, looking out the window at the stars where ships from dozens of species now traveled freely through space that had once been controlled by fear. You underestimated humanity because you measured us by your own standards. You thought that because we were young and our technology was simple, we were weak. But you forgot that youth means potential and simplicity often means flexibility. Vexter spent his remaining years studying human history and philosophy, trying to understand how his ancient and mighty empire had been brought down by a species that most Zephyrians had considered barely civilized. In his final report, written for future historians, he reached a conclusion that would have seemed impossible during his years of conquest. The Zephyrian Empire fell not because humans were superior warriors or possessed better technology, he wrote. We fell because we had forgotten the most important lesson of survival, that true strength comes not from the ability to dominate others but from the wisdom to adapt, the courage to stand together and the determination never to surrender in the face of injustice.